Grandma, look! It's that bloke you like. You know, the big chap in the flowery shirts who's always looking at things and banging on about history and stuff. Riddles of the river, that's right. Except this time, it's riddles on the road. I've got my explorer's hat, I've got my map. Come on, let's go and explore the A11. Yeah, the A11. Well, what did you expect? The Silk Road to Samarkand or something? We should be so lucky. Come on. Right then, under starter's orders, we're off with the first riddle on the subject of travel in the early 1800s. A time when the newfangled state-of-the-art steel-sprung coaches were bouncing about the countryside at a staggering 4 miles an hour. Norwich to London in a day and a night. Whoa! In the heyday of the stagecoach, all across the country, people had come bustling down narrow alleyways and little streets to climb aboard at the great coaching inns. Coaches crisscrossed the entire country. Here in Norwich, there was the Magnet, the Times, the Phenomenon, the Gurney's original day coach, and from just over here at the Maid's Head Hotel, snuggling down under the walls of the cathedral, 3 times a week, when I can get through the traffic, 3 times a week, you could board. You're not going to give me a ticket, are you? 3 times a week, you could board the Norwich machine as it came rattling and roaring out of the yard, along the cobbles, splashing mud over everyone further up the road, and it would take you down to London. Of course, we have a rosy, romantic, snow-speckled Christmas card notion about coach travel. In reality, there wasn't much comfort and joy along what passed for the A11 in the late 1700s. It was shake, rattle and roll till your head ached. News sheets like the Norwich Mercury carried the coach company's blurb, and there were plenty of takers, even though the cheap outside seats cost more than a working man's weekly wage. And my goodness, if it wasn't cheap, it certainly wasn't cheerful either. Coaches were dangerous. They were also cold, cramped, and appallingly uncomfortable. You'd find yourself making long journeys with precisely the sort of people you prefer not to be making long journeys with. Ranting radical politicians, arguing with tedious Tory landowners, smelly travelling salesmen, and if you were really unlucky, an even smellier babe in arms. Romantic it wasn't. The only way you could avoid the indignity of a coach journey was to be one of the tiny number of people that had their own private coach. Or you could travel by Royal Mail. Oh no, what have I done with the keys? Right you are, that's my bit done. Now it's your turn. Here's your first riddle. Why do you think a true blue boy from Ipswich would only show you the colour of his money over my dead body, mate? And then why would he turn scarlet while other people were in black despair or red with rage? Go on, chew on that for a while. Slowly, but with gathering speed, Britain was beginning to shrink, and people began to dream dreams. One hopeless idealist, Mr. John Palmer, came up with an idea for an efficiently managed, non-profit-making organisation that would carry letters and packages the length and breadth of the kingdom. It would be fast, reliable, punctual. The king even gave it the stamp of royal approval and called it the Royal Mail. But one Norfolk coachman, bless him, still keeps a mail coach on the road. God, they're beautiful, aren't they?
Ah, no, lads.
What were the real benefits when the mail came in? How did the coaching scene change?
Well, it changed because prior to the first mail coach, which had an armed guard, and it was then post office mail, they were robbed. You know, I mean, they were robbed regularly. And what you had, women couldn't travel for a start. They couldn't travel without an escort. Well, once you had an armed guard up there, he was responsible for passengers as well as mail.
You'd have to be daft or absolutely desperate to take on a mail coach, is that right? Because they were so well armed.
What do you mean to rob it?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they robbed one. One man robbed one at Hungerford. And it was only a month or 2 months into the mail coach being, and they wounded him, and then put a rope around his neck and strung him up to a tree and left him there to show people it was a bad idea.
Which brings us to the dead body bit of the riddle. If someone was daft and desperate enough to take on the mail, the guard knew his duty. The blunderbuss and cutlass weren't just for decoration. His Majesty's mail must be protected at all costs.
The only way through there is kill him. So over my dead body, that's the only way you'll get the mail.
That's where the expression comes from?
Yeah, pretty certain it is, yeah.
So, that's the first part of our riddle answered, isn't it? Over my dead body was the coach guard's best practice procedure. But why did he turn scarlet? Well, it wasn't because he was all kitted out like a grenadier guardsman, you know, with his brace of pistols, his cutlass, his blunderbuss, and his bright brass-button scarlet coat. It was because in 1822, the Ipswich Mail was relieved by robbers of nearly 32,000 quid. That is an absolutely phenomenal sum of money for those days. It makes the great train robbers look like they were out after school dinner money. Banks back then were small family affairs, issuing their own notes and relying on customer confidence. Losing an embarrassingly large bundle of Alexander & Co.'s Ipswich Black banknotes left their customers dead impressed. The guard signally failed to live up to his professional expectations. He survived to tell the tale. He turned scarlet with embarrassment. Hey, Annika Rice, eat your heart out. Ah, the bank who owned the dosh, they must have been the ones who were in black despair and red with rage, says you. No, says I. Wait and see. All will be revealed. On, driver! And in the everyday words of another famous phrase from our coaching heritage, don't spur the horses! Not to put too fine a point on it, the bank was well and truly in the organic material that rose growers happily shoveled off the road whenever the mail coach passed by. The robbers were absolutely delighted. Messrs. Alexander & Co. were deeply dismayed, but they moved with commendable expedition to outmaneuver the felons. They recalled every single Ipswich Black to the bank. Once they got them, they reissued the notes, only this time in red ink. In the course of a single afternoon, the Ipswich Black banknote became absolutely worthless, and the robbers were left seeing red. By the 1820s, the stagecoach connected you to every city in the realm, sometimes with even a choice of route. A popular stop on the journey up to London that went via Ipswich was this place, a staging post where they changed the teams of horses ready for the next stage of the journey. This is where you clambered down stiff and sore, or ran off to inspect the facilities, or hobbled your way to the roaring fire to thaw out with the aid of a large spiced rum. Now, I'll bet that loads of you travelling around the countryside have been in places where the marketing men have been desperate to convince you that you are staying in a traditional English coaching inn. Well, it's rarely true, but shall I give you a few clues how to spot the genuine article? The first one is look for the big arch. You see, coaches were massive affairs, and they needed a tremendous amount of space to get in and out of the courtyards, which is the second clue, a courtyard or stable yard. Now, the old White Hart Inn, the Skull Inn near Diss, was one of the busiest in the country, and they had a huge arch here, which allowed the coaches to sweep in almost at full speed into this big space here. Of course, when the coaches stopped running, they very sensibly blocked it all off and turned it into a nice little bar, ho-ho. When it was built just after the Civil War, it was probably the largest inn in England, but it definitely had the largest inn sign, a gallows sign that stretched across the entire width of the highway. You couldn't miss it. This one supported 25 life-size statues of gods and goddesses. It certainly got people talking, and it set John Peck back a cool £1,000. Still, it was built to last. They tore it down, you know. Do you believe that? The most magnificent, majestic inn sign in the history of English pubs. All because the landlord reckoned he couldn't afford to maintain it. So down it came. Gone. Forever. Of course, competition between private coach companies made them lean and mean and able to offer total customer care and convenience. Ha! Tell that to the people who were waiting outside Skull Inn in October 1822. The Norwich Times and Gurney's day coaches took commercial rivalry a little too far that day. Racing each other back to Norwich, they each realised it had cost them the race to stop at Skull. So they didn't. I bet you're wondering, just who did win that race? Was it the Norwich Times or the Gurney's original day coach? Do you know, I think I'll make you wait till after the break before I tell you. And don't go phoning a friend. Cheers. Part 2. Oh, well, that'll be riddle number 2, won't it? Why do you think a crowd of stroppy transvestites, taffies to a man, why do you think they would get really hacked off with a bunch of sober-sided citizens who were attempting to put a stop to their freewheeling lifestyle? This is Grog. It's a fat bloke on the telly showed us how to make it last year. Oh, and the race, of course. Well, the Gurney's original day coach, they won the race. They rolled into Norwich a full 10 minutes ahead of the opposition. While the coaches were getting organised, road building and maintenance wasn't. The Highways Act of 1555 obliged local parishioners to turn out 4 days a year with shovels and mend the roads. Well, that really did the trick, as you can imagine. Roads were going nowhere until someone came up with a cunning plan. In the late 1690s, they introduced the notion of turnpikes. Need the big hat. Civil War, remember? Roundheads fighting the Cavaliers. Roundheads wore hats just like this anyway. They fought each other with 18-foot spears, which were called pikes. Don't need the hat anymore. Now, those pikes gave people the idea to make a barrier across the road, a pole with spikes along the top to stop people jumping their horses over. And at the end of that pole, there would be a man with a leather satchel. And as travellers came through with their coaches or their carts or on horseback, they would pay a toll to the gatekeeper, who would swing open the turnpike so that we could all go merrily along our way to Journey's End. The Attleborough to Wymondham Road was the second to be turnpiked in Britain. Its toll houses are long gone, but others survive all over the country. Keep your eyes peeled for circular or octagonal houses near the road. Chances are they're toll gates. The last Turnpike Trust shut up shop in the 1890s, but in the Norwich Record Office the details of 100 years of highway history is written up in the minute books of the Mattershall to Swaffham Trust. They contain the story of the toll keepers of Etling Green. John Deans, the embezzling toll keeper, caught pocketing the tolls. Then Robert Edwards took over. He couldn't make it pay, and the bailiffs took everything that he owned. All this and more happened in a simple little toll house that few people even notice. Today, Maureen and Dee live there. That's something to do with the toll house. Yeah, oh yeah. That isn't. Don't even ask. Of course, they don't collect tolls anymore, but with the amount of traffic going past, I bet you they wish they did. There were 5 toll houses like this on this road. I mean, as far as I know, this is the only one that's left.
We were told the toll gate's roughly about 300 years old.
No, it's not 300 years. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. It's actually 200, maybe a little bit less. The trust was set up in 1781, and these houses were all purpose-built for the road. I don't know of anywhere where they used an old house and changed it about. They were purpose-built to go with the road.
How much was charged to pass through the toll gate then in those times?
I just knew you were going to ask me that, Dee. I didn't get a chance to look it up. But what I can tell you is that the tolls vary from one turnpike to another, and then on each individual turnpike there was a whole list of tolls that they charged. I mean, literally a whole list. They'd hang it on the outside of the gable, a big painted board with a menu, if you like, of who could come along and what it would cost them. Everything from a pedestrian right the way up to a big, 8-wheel cart with a massive load on the back. And that's where this bit comes in, because this is actually a wheel gauge, and it measures the width of the wheel. And of course, the key thing about this is that the narrower the wheel, the greater the toll, because that's what was going to do the damage to your road surface. That's what's going to cost you money at the end of the day.
Very interesting.
Thank you. Can I have my lunch now? Of course, you know what would have been really nice, wouldn't it? Was if we'd have had a horse and cart to test this out on property. Oh my goodness, steps back in amazement. What a surprise! I'm awfully sorry, sir, but you may not be aware of the fact that a recent EU directive has given us permission to reinstate the tolls on this road.
You can just forget it.
No, I'm sorry. This is no laughing matter. You know how seriously the government take road transport.
I'm not laughing either.
We are going to have to measure the wheels. Well, you know...
Fine!
Hey!
Ah, you think. Still out.
Oh, I see. So he's a toll-evading horse as well, isn't he? Oh, that's bad news, Mick. You're under the 2 inches. I'm going to have to charge you more there, mate. Now, mind you, I could be open to a deal. You pay me and I'll take us both for a pint. Just that. There you go. Put it there.
Now, look. That's all I got for the rest of the week.
I've always got to make a living. Oh, hey, hang on. No, you carry on. I'm going to get something off this beamer. Excuse me.
That'll be a better idea.
Yeah, they'll have a lot more money than me. So, it was toll roads that put an end to people's freewheeling ways. But 200 years later, Mick and Moses travel free because the toll system's gone forever. Well, till they reintroduce it on the motorways. That'll get folks steamed up. In the 1840s and the 1850s, Britain was in the grip of railway mania. Tracks were being laid here, there and everywhere, and eventually trains would take away the trade from the turnpikes and the toll houses. If you look at the minute book for 1872, you'll find the very last entry, and then there's nothing. And that spelt the end of the road for Etling Green. So, that just leaves us with the taffy transvestites and why they were so hacked off. Well, the governors of the Turnpike Trusts assumed that ordinary people shared their boundless enthusiasm for the whole idea of toll roads and toll payments. There were just two problems with that. You see, the first was that those ordinary people have been using those very same roads for centuries and never having to pay a penny piece for the privilege. Suddenly, they were being told that from now on they'd have to pay. And as you can imagine, they weren't best pleased. The second problem, well, you see, when times were hard, there was absolutely no slack in the system. It was too rigid. If there'd been a bad harvest, if there was widespread unemployment, people were still expected to pay the same tolls. As far as they were concerned, they were being asked to subsidise the rich to travel great distances at their convenience. They got really hacked off at the prospect of that. I have to say, small sport that I am, there's a definite limit to how much I'm going to hack off just to make a piece to camera. In South Wales in 1839, they decided they'd had enough of hardship and injustice. Armed with hammers and axes, working men set out to smash the toll gates. The Rebecca riots. Now, rioting was a hanging offence back then, so they disguised themselves in women's clothing. Because in the Bible, Rebecca smashed down the gates of her enemies. Welsh chapel cariad. But is there any evidence to suggest that farm labourers over in East Anglia considered cross-dressing for social justice? Yeah, I know, strictly speaking, Wales isn't quite in our region, but I have to state quite categorically that I was unable to find any documentary evidence whatsoever that indicated that East Anglian farm labourers dressed in women's clothing when they were smashing up toll gates. They clearly didn't feel it was a legitimate or even desirable form of social protest. Hey, look, don't knock it till you tried it. Besides, don't you think I look just a little like Emma Thompson in Sense and Sensibility? Suit yourself.